Okay, fire. So, Krish, do you want to just briefly mention kind of how you got into CS or like go through your project or whatever and give a short blurb, and then I guess we can go over like questions a little bit later.
Yeah. So, hi everyone. I'm Krish. And yeah, so I'll just talk about how I got into programming first. In the summer of 2020, when the pandemic hit, I was stuck at home over summer, didn't have much to do. So I picked up like my friends, my dad, like a lot of people recommended to me Python. Um, I picked up Python for like just like 2 months. Then I basically did basic loops, iteration, stuff like that, basic, conditionals, file input and output in Python for 2 months, building up the skills. And then basically what I did after that is I like learned Flask, like a web service. And then later I learned databases to store my data or how to like learn how to store data. And then eventually like I'd make my first project, which was like a Twitter clone, and I'd incorporate all those steps, which I'd learned like Flask database. And on top of that, make a UI in React. And yeah, that's how I started getting into programming. And then once I did my initial project, after that, I made several more projects. I can just like name a few of them. So one is like called Chess Time, and it basically calculates like how much time you've spent on chess.com in a given year. And I made that using like integrating the chess.com API and then retrieving data from that and then like rendering it in a front end. And then another thing I made is like uh like cricket Wordle. So there's like League of Cricket, the Indian Premier League. And basically what I did is I just web scraped that data and made it like a Wordle style game. So you could guess the player based on their age, name, team. And yeah, now I'm doing other projects. Um, Currently I'm building something. It's like an iOS app to deal with aimed at helping elderly folks like track their health, track their vital signs, their blood pressure, and track that. And then essentially what we're going to do in the future, like in the next week, we're using machine learning to then recommend them certain diet plans or certain fitness recommendations, um and how to do that. And yeah, I guess like that's like quick 2 minute summary of like where I've been, how I got here. If you have like any specific questions, yeah, feel free to like
Yeah,
ask.
yeah, for sure. I know you mentioned that like you just picked it up over like COVID. Was there anything specifically that like sparked your interest in it, or is it something that you just because everyone recommended it to you, that's what you got into it?
Yeah, so basically what happened was over COVID, I had nothing planned over the summer because initially we were going to go travel, but obviously that got scrapped. And so it was like, yeah, my friends were recommending me like, take like CS50. I heard like I heard several times that summer, take CS50 by Harvard, take CS50, takes intro to CS. And my dad also recommended to me. So I was like, all right, might as well take it. And then once I realized like the power of what you could do and what you could build by yourself, like things that are useful to you, right? Um, is when I really like I remember like being stuck in chemistry that same year, and we had to do like electron configurations and like just like 5, 10 worksheets of electron configurations. So like just like after that I just quickly wrote up some code to generate electron configurations because it's like there's a pattern that emerges and then you don't have to do the manual calculation every time. You can save like so much time. So yeah, it's just like the amount of cool stuff you can build that just, helps helps improves your quality of life or saves you time is how I really stuck with programming.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of people like get into programming seeing how it can like help you at school and like just I remember like the way I got into it was like with flashcards and stuff like that, like random orders of flashcards. So there's a lot of really cool, interesting uses of like of programming and computer science in general, in like the school. And then just out of all your projects you've done, since you have quite a few, and I know you mentioned a bit about them, but like what's something that you're particularly proud of? Maybe it's something you learned, maybe it's the impact that it has or could potentially have, if it's your iOS app or whatever it might be.
Yeah, so one of the projects I was really proud about um was like the chess time software that I created, because the thing with that was I spent like when I didn't know React, I like coded the whole thing in Python, which took like about 5 days. And then I spent like a month learning React. And then actually when ChatGPT came out, like I like used it to like help transfer my Python code into React code because I wasn't that good at it yet. Um, but then that's one of my favorite projects because like the like impact it's had on my life. For context, like it like helps calculate like the time you spend on chess.com. And I had like a severe like chess addiction during the pandemic. As like a lot like a large number of people who played chess did. Um, and so it helped me become aware of how much chess I was playing. And then it also got like an insane amount of users. Like I remember one day just looking at like the analytics from Netlify, and it was like about like 410 peak users in one day. So um that was really like that was really cool to look at.
Yeah, definitely. That makes a bunch of sense. And then, what's some of the challenges that you faced during your programming journey and how do you overcome them? And then could you also talk about like how you use ChatGPT to like aid you in your process of, I guess, like programming?
Yeah, so there's a lot of challenges that I faced programming. So like a lot of the challenges that I used to face programming were like errors, which like, you know, you think, oh, I'll just Stack Overflow this or something. But those there were some errors which like literally could not resolve for 2, 3 days. I remember one of them really vividly. It was like, you know, like sending an HTTP request from like one server to another server, and like it was just blocked by the browser because of like CORS policy, and that took like 2 days to resolve. But I think the best way that worked for me is just like creating a network of people who are more experienced than you, people who have like the same experience of you, just creating a network and then tapping into that network who can aid you. And, you know, like if they've already done it, then they already know how to do it. You can ask them, um, like, you know, what to do. So creating a network and like having mentors, having people who have done it is really important. Another thing to aid you, like this is like kind of tied into the last one. A lot of these like services, of like applications that you use, whether it's like React, a database, Docker, whatever technology you're trying to learn, they'll have like support forums or Discord servers. And usually in these Discord servers, you can just like hop in and like, you know, here's my issue. And then those guys are like, you know, pros at their language, and they'll be like, um, here's how we can help. In regards to ChatGPT, what I've been doing is um, I think the best way to use ChatGPT efficiently is use it like it's common sense, but like use it as an aid. Some people are just like relying completely on ChatGPT, which is like okay, it's like manageable, but it works so much better if you use it as an aid. Um, so how I've been incorporating it basically, like I don't know iOS development currently. Um, I'm still in the process of learning it. But for our hackathon, we have like a rough idea of like I'm not the best at like, you know, iOS development, but what ChatGPT can do is, you know, you can tell it like certain specific things like, you know, on my application, I want to render like a circle in the middle, or like like tedious tasks like those, which you can look up the documentation. Yeah, you can probably do it, but like something like that, you're probably going to only do like once or twice if you don't make any iOS apps. Like obviously learn how to like write functions, in like whatever language you're making the app, like learn functions, learn conditional, learn loops, because some people will just like, use Chat GPT for the whole thing, which doesn't give you like the flexibility you want to have. And it also takes time because like if I'm asking Chat GPT how to write a for loop, well then that costs me like 1 minute because I'm gonna ask it, it's gonna respond. Whereas I can write a for loop in like 5 seconds. So you have to see like where it can be effective to you. Um, and then another thing, obviously, is prompt engineering, like how you state your question to GPT. There's like a bunch of like articles and stuff that can help you get better at that.
Yeah, and there was a question in the chat as well, but like, when did you first start learning, or when you first started learning a new language, how long would you spend per day slash week learning it, and how long would it take you to become proficient or at least decent?
Yeah. So essentially, what I used to do is since I was learning, I did a lot of learning of technologies over summer. So I'd pick it up like at the beginning of the week, and then like for 2, 3 hours a day, I'd spend about 3 hours a day, and then basically it took me about like um for something like Python, it depends also like what language it is, because like Python, there's like numerous applications. You can do data science, machine learning, uh like just regular Flask applications. So there's like lots of ways to go from Python. But like if you're learning like a database language like SQL, there's not really much to do because it's like the scope is much smaller. So I'd say one, it depends on the language, but in general, it took me about like I'd say to become proficient in Python, it was about a month where I could say, okay, now I can write these functions. I can, use um these applications. I can make this web service with Python. But something like a database, learning a database, it only took me a week. And then something like which I don't use that much, or I know like that I won't use that much, like CSS and HTML was one of those things. So I only spent like a week on that because my intention wasn't to like become really proficient in that, just to get the job done. Um, so I'd say it depends on the language, and usually it'll take anywhere between like uh, a day, a month, or a week to a month.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And I guess just because this event is also like young, like kids, I guess, or like just people in CS or like computing, how do you manage like or balance programming work with other aspects of your life, such as like school, but also like social activities as well?
Yeah, so this was really hard for me like a couple months ago because I would just come home and I'd be slammed with schoolwork and clubs and all that. So I didn't have much time to do this. But what I've realized is that if if you're like there's two things. One is like I usually like do a lot of like programming and like the nights, like um, like uh you just have to like find time basically. Like for me, like a lot of the stuff I did was also on the weekends. You have a Saturday open, 3 hours on a Saturday. You can easily like build like something like that. But for me, like the most important thing that helped me is like being passionate about what I was building. Like I remember um like some days I would just come home and like immediately start working on a project that I was building. And if I wasn't that passionate, uh then I would just like you know spend those 2 hours on like messaging or like some form of social media. So I think if you're passionate, that automatically improves your efficiency. And then yeah, it's you can, and from that like it's easier to manage in terms of uh productivity.
Right, I think that makes a bunch of sense. And then, what clubs or extracurriculars are you part of? And then, like, have you attended any coding related events? How was your experience in attending them if you have? And then, are you going to be going to like future hackathons, I guess? And what are you looking to do there if you're going?
Yeah, so I've attended a couple coding events. So my first event was um in 2021. It was a hackathon from my school. That was my first real exposure to hacking in a competitive environment. And our team built like some like share ride application, which like, takes in you like addresses of like people at the school, and then we like basically match them based on their location, like who can take who, to minimize the distance traveled, like a carpool app basically. And although we didn't win, that was my first experience at a hackathon, and I learned like a lot. There's a lot of I actually recommend that everyone here, like if you're really like interested, you go to hackathons because there's so much you learn, like just like also just more than teamwork, like how to like collaborate on code, and then like also like GitHub, which is like a way you can not only store your code, but like you can work with a team on that. And it shows you like all those tools, obviously teamwork, and it's just a nice environment to like have your first exposure. And then yeah, so I went to that hackathon, and then over the summer I went to another hackathon, which was an Ethereum hackathon, which is like cryptocurrency. Um, yeah, over the summer, and it was in like San Francisco. Um, and a lot of things with hackathons is just like most hackathons are just open. Some you have to apply, but like most of them are like open, which is why it's like a really nice exposure because you can meet a lot of cool people. Like networking is also a huge thing at hackathons. And then in the future, I actually have like or three hackathons lined up for April. One is like next week, that actually Sarich told me about earlier. So that's pretty cool. And yeah, at the next hackathons, obviously, I wanted to build that iOS app. Well, that's like separate, but at the next hackathons, as we're seeing like GPT emerging, me and my team probably want to do something related to that. And yeah.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then I guess just surrounding like networking as a whole, or I guess like competition in hackathons, have you ever felt like competition in general has been like pushing you to do way more? Do you think it's like toxic, or how do you like balance like, for example, like if you scroll on Twitter, you see like a lot of different things. Is that motivating? Is that demotivating to see so many different things happening? And how should you like deal with competition, I guess?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So, there's for me, there's like two types of competition, right? So obviously like the motivating one and the demotivating one. Um, Usually like if I see like, some guy like won, Stanford hacks or tree hacks, or like, this guy beat us in the hackathon. Um, yeah, like before what I used to do in my first hackathon when we lost is like, yeah, that guy can't win. His product was so much worse than ours. But then you realize like, oh, they won because of their pitch, not because of the product. So you have to see like how, like why they won, because the judges aren't out to get you. So you have to like sort of realize like what's going on with the competition. And I'd also say like, don't like be too hard on yourself. Like I started coding when I was like 2020, so that's 3 years ago. So when I was like 15, right? Here, if you like go on like, Twitter or something, you already see like 14-year-olds who have like, 6,000 contributions on GitHub. And like that's like probably like more than like some software engineers like in the industry themselves have. So like don't be demotivated by that, but just like that's like a good opportunity to like, go to the 14-year-old, be like, how are you able to do so much? What's motivating you? Let's chat, like, what are you up to? How can we work together or something like that? Um, so don't let it demotivate you. Like whoever's above you, reach out to them, think like, how can I talk with this person? And then whoever's below you, try to help them, right? Like people will look to you to like sort of guide them. Like it's like a chain, right? You help the people above you, and then or the people above you help you, and then you help the people below you. So in that sense, competition is like good because it pushes you to your limits. And I think that's why hackathons are great because you just have a lot of people. And I mean, if there was no competition, no one would try anything, which is why it's like better to go to like uh hackathons where there's a lot of motivated people. So you can really push yourself and you and your team can hopefully succeed.
Yeah, sure. And there's also another question in chat, but like, what skills do you believe are the most important to build to become a better programmer? And then also just to add on to a little bit, maybe you can, actually, this will be the next question, but answer.
Okay. Yeah, so I think in terms of skill set, um, one of the most important skills is critical thinking. Um, Obviously. So like when you're designing any software, right, you need to have like what I like to call like you need to have like if you're building like a website, you need to have a layout, you need to have a design in mind. You can't just like, open up Visual Studio Code and expect the code to come out. Um, so critical thinking, also like when you're trying to solve problems, like, how do I optimize the time, like the time, like the responsiveness of this application? How do I optimize, getting users? Do I like put an email list at the front? Do I like how do I optimize whatever you're trying to like do better? You need to like critically think for that. And then like also like algorithmic problems, if you're ever trying to like, you know, get better at those are like also like heavily based on logical thinking because at the end of the day coding is just like you're telling a computer what to do, right? So if you give it like the correct logical steps, then you'll succeed. So critical thinking definitely. um and then obviously I feel like one of the big skills that is overlooked is communication. Whether it's like if you're in a team place, like if I can write like, like 300 lines of code, but I can't explain like what it does and how it got there, then that's a bit of a problem because like when someone else on my team tries to debug the code or tries to add a feature, like how are they going to know what to add? And so that's why communication is really important. Um, and then obviously, networking also relies solely on communication. How do you build network? How do you make connections within the industry? So communication, critical thinking, and then at the end of the day, like all things in life, hard work, just, you know, hard work. I mean, there's no shortcut to like success in any field, right? So same here.
Right, that makes sense. And then, um, what do you think, or like the question that I was going to ask was, do you think like computer science in general is just programming, or is it a bunch of other like algorithmic thinking or like the critical thinking skills you talked about, or are there other things that contribute to computer science? Because I know there's like a lot of people who want to get into it, but aren't maybe the greatest at like programming. So could you maybe walk about like the different things that teams need that are still maybe in computer science or related tangentially to computer science, like I don't know, pitch decks or presenters or all of those things, etc.
Yeah, so I'd say that having a computer science, like getting into computer science or like just knowing like how it works is extremely important because like even if you're like not in the field currently, like you can, like I mentioned, like I did the electron configuration thing, right, like that, right? There's like so many more applications um to that. Like I know one of my history teachers, like he knew a bit of like computer science, so he basically like used a Google spreadsheet to like track like in his class like how many students like ditched class, how many students like move seats or whatever, and then he like ran like regressions on a model he created. So which like made him see, okay, like here's a great correlation, like this guy's getting a C because he missed like 70% of class, right? So it's useful in like uh circumstances um uh like that. And then for I think like just having a degree overall is good, or not a degree, just like the exposure to it. In terms of like pitch decks, I do think it could potentially help, like if you know like what you're talking about within the pitch deck. Um, but I feel like if you can incorporate like pitch deck, like a lot of like pitch decks are like trying to propose a solution, right? And sometimes that solution can involve software, like you know, feed we're trying to feed a certain population. Like, how do we track areas that have food insecurity? How do we like aggregate that data and then, have our agencies send food to those places? So that's like a direct use of software. And then if you're the guy making the pitch deck or you're the guy presenting it, then you should know like how did we use like web scraping, or how did we use geoloc like whatever technique you use to map the data. And so that's why I think it's pretty important.
Right. And then I guess there's like two questions in chat, but how do you collaborate effectively using GitHub? Because sometimes it can be hard with like conflicts, etc. Did someone teach you GitHub, or did you just like play around with it and learn yourself? And then we can talk about GitHub later.
Yeah, so GitHub I learned by just like reading the documentation. It takes a couple of days to learn it. Like it took a couple of days for me. Basically, just do projects like, just try like they all have documentation. So the best way I did was I just like, git add this, get like see what each command does. There's like, at the end of the day, I just searched up like the like top 15 commands, and like now I don't use more than like 8 commands. So if you just figure out like the top 15 commands, this is like for most softwares, by the way. If you just like figure out like, what is the most used commands, what are the most used options, and you can save yourself a lot of time. So what I did is I figured out the most used commands, and then yeah, merge conflicts at like obviously I was collaborating on my own for the most part. So like when we reached that hackathon, I remember like, collaborating, and we kept getting merge conflicts because we were like I had never collaborated on GitHub with other people on the repo. So yeah, that was a learning experience. So after that, we like Googled it and basically found out how to resolve those. But yeah, it's just like a lot of experimentation, um, which can help you.
Okay, yeah, awesome. And then just to answer the last question, like the question in chat, what are your thoughts and experiences with artificial intelligence? And where do you see the future application of new AI models? Maybe like just in general, aside from like ChatGPT and like large language models.
Yeah, so I've had a couple experiences with AI actually. Like the two of the projects I've created were like also related to chess, as you can probably tell, I'm like a chess nerd. Like basically what one did is it used image detection software to like find the pieces on a chessboard and like the positions of the pieces. And then basically, so you could essentially take a picture of your board and then it'll import that into an engine, which you can analyze. So that's like, I think image detection is one of the major use cases that we're gonna see accelerate in the future too, because like as you can tell, like cancer detection is one of the fields that's really benefiting from AI and machine learning that relies on image detection uh as well as like like self-driving cars. That's also image detection, or Boston Dynamics robots. Those will also require image detection. So I think that's the field um that has a lot of potential for future applications. And then another thing which I recently created was like basically it would essentially use like an API to generate images. Um like it's basically like Mid-Journey, or like basically you feed it a prompt and it'll generate you images. That's another place where I used AI. But I think the future, other than like large language models, I think we're going to be seeing a lot more content that is AI generated, like whether that's in video format, article format, because now like any format, even audio format, now is able to like you can voice over like Kanye West, or like Joe Biden's voice. Um, you can voice it over. So like video, audio, writing is all like, how do you tell if it's real or fake at this point? And it's just gonna like become like more like much worse in the future. But I think AI does have some like potential prospects, like the image detection and yeah, like ML models are great for like, predicting certain things, past or future. Like if you have the past data, I think healthcare is a big application. Um, and yeah.
That makes sense. And just I guess like asking about the future, maybe not related to AI, but like what are some fields or like programming related projects that you want to work on specifically, and why?
So like something that I want to do in the future is probably like work for like some company that's like making a big impact in like helping people. Um, wait, sorry, can you repeat the question? Like,
Yeah, so like what are some programming related projects that you want to work on in the future and why?
oh, okay. Yeah, so one thing I really wanted to do is like this has been like a dream of mine since like when I first got into program is create like a social networking app. In the future, I feel like those have like a lot of potential because obviously it's social networking. So like if your app is like good enough, um, then it can amass a bunch of users really quickly. Um, uh, and like something like Be Real, if you guys know what Be Real is, um, where like it's a concept so simple and it has like an insane amount of users. Like if like Be Real, and like the code base is not hard at all. Like Instagram's code base, okay, that's like way too many lines of code. But like Be Reals is just it's a simple screen, you post a photo a day. And so I think like something like that where it's simple enough but it's unique enough that people would use it and then it has a lot of impact within the community. And then another thing I want to do is uh like what I'm trying to do right now is like I've seen it's like extremely hard for high schoolers to get like research internships or like internships at like any sort of company. Like it took me like 4 or 5 months to try to like actually secure some things. So like basically what I want to be able to do is like, you know, like is there like using Chat GPT, can we like aggregate like a database of like emails like if I enter UCLA and like CS faculty, right? Can I like see a list of emails of professors like who are interested in computer imaging or who are interested in genetics? And then can I like because right now the process takes way too long. You go to their website, you keep searching for hours, and then next thing you know, like you have to go to UC Davis's website for something different. And like, can we basically like aggregate that sort of data in one place and make it easier for high school students? That's what I want to also do in the future.
Right, those are really, really ambitious. And then I guess to kind of go into more deeply on like the aspect of learning programming again, just because there's a lot of things. I know you mentioned back that we use like different Discord servers to like ask questions or like I don't know, like maybe classes like CS50 by Harvard or whatever. But are there any other resources that you can recommend? Do you think ChatGPT can be a resource? I know you mentioned it's an aid, but do you think it'd be a resource? How else can people learn to code? Um, and then do you think there's a way to like budget your time to learn code?
Yeah. So obviously, like you mentioned, the Discord servers were a huge help. And then later that year, I actually got on Twitter, so I met some cool folks from there. But other than that, like a really good resource to learn programming in general is there's this YouTube channel called Fireship, and so they have like the guy has like really good videos of like walkthroughs of like here I used I built a React app, or here I built like a database, here I did this. So that's another good resource. And then there's like a couple websites. I think one is called like the Odin project, and it like basically gives you a framework to follow. Like if you want to like get more into back end, you can do all like Ruby on Rails and like those type of frameworks. If you want to go more into front end, they have like, and it's like really structured course material. So it feels like you're like following the course and it's like structured learning. which is like really important because you don't want to be in a place where you spend like 5 hours copying some random tutorial and you have like no idea what's going on. And another thing is you can one thing that really helped me is like getting an accountability partner, like say, when I took that Harvard course, me and a friend basically were like, okay, let's sign a contract. If we don't finish this course, we're gonna like Zell each other like $50, right? So like creating a accountability contract, which like helps you, you know, achieve what you want to achieve. And then another resource would just be like people like you're like just look for people. There's always going to be people like whether it's at your school, it's at another school. There's always going to be some people, maybe your friend's dad is a software engineer, maybe your dad is a software engineer, maybe like, the guy you meet and like on a like just like ask around and like see what like it's really surprising, but like people are willing to help you. Like if you approach them the right way, the amount of like help people are willing to give, it's like extremely like it's extremely impressive. So yeah, just ask around, put yourself out there. That's another thing. Like if you want like to show yourself, like this is like comes down later. Like I started in 2020, but I only created my website in 2022. Like create a website, show yourself out there. Like this is like one of the good books I read. Like it's called like Show Your Work. I recommend like you guys highly read it. Even if you're not like it doesn't have to do with programming in general. It's just like put yourself out there, write a blog, write about your opinions, like show the world like what you value in effort to like and then it fosters serendipity, or like people will come to you or people will see your article, and basically it's just like connects you with people, and that's like one of the best feelings.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess you could already mention this in your last question, but this is the last question of the session, unless anyone else in the chat has any questions. But what advice slash tips do you have for young people who are interested to get into programming and possibly pursuing a career in CS? Um, I don't know, maybe like a step by step. I don't know. Because you kind of already talked about like getting out there and like just going with the flow
Yeah.
and like just taking courses. But if there's anything else you want to add to it.
So like step by step, if you like really like, CS is what you want to do, I'd say first like learn a language like learn a language like Python. And then like from there you can see like what you're in like see what you're interested in, and like look around the world, like what type of problem do you want to solve, or it doesn't even have to be a problem. Like what are you interested in? Are you interested in like creating like 3D animations, or are you interested in like creating a simulation for like NASA? Like what is it that it really inspires you? And like a lot of stuff I did was chess related because like it was one of my other passions. But like if you're really into rockets, like NASA has an API. If you're really into running, Strava has an API. So like you can integrate with so many different things. Like that's why I like to integrate with like one of my other passions. So like whatever you see, like, do you want to create like a software um which helps like music listeners? You can do something with Spotify. Take Spotify's data, compile it into like a nice report, like Spotify Wrapped, except it comes monthly or something like that, right? So just look around, like what you're interested in, um, and then from there, like obviously try to find people who have done that or who know what they're doing somewhat. You can look on like Discord or all like the sources that we've talked about. And then after you find those people, just start, like just do it. There's not much to think about. I would highly suggest like stay away from like 5 hour tutorials or like any of that stuff, because like at that point you're just like copying them and you're not like applying it. But like try to learn like the basic concepts, like okay, here's a function, here's what a dictionary is, here's how to use state and React, right? So like find out like the core things, and then obviously uh yeah, like use now there's Chat GPT, which is another beautiful like resource that you can use. Oh, I'm stuck, like can you explain use state, can you explain whatever this, can you explain this line of code basically? um yeah, so learn Python, then whatever interests you. If you want to learn back end, learn back end. If you want to learn front end, learn front end. And then programming at the end of the day is like a lot more than just creating apps. There's also like competitive programming where you can like, compete in competitions where you solve like algorithmic problems. And if you guys are interested in that, there's like the USA Computing Olympiad, um, which is uh which is kind of like the USA Math Olympiad, except for coding. So yeah, there's like different avenues you can go. But I suggest like, just like, do a little bit of each, right? Like if you want to do competitive, do a little competitive. Like try a little bit of each and then branch out into like, okay, I really like front end. I really like creating websites. This is what I'm gonna do. Here, I create like 5 websites in the past month, right? So like after the exploration phase, you can go deep into it.
Yeah, and then just in chat, I think maybe like last question, but there was a question about like how you actually network and like how do you reach out to people and form a connection, and then for like research or projects, internships, or any other small advice, how do you go about approaching someone?
Yeah, so I'm still trying to figure out this myself, but one of the things that I like to do is basically like there's like 3 parts, like there's like 3 parts, right? So like if you want to approach people for help, you can say like first like show them what you've done, right? Like you can't just say like, can you fix this code? Like no one's gonna do that, right? It's like when you go into like a Discord server or like you're asking someone, don't say like, can you fix this code? Or like you should say like, okay, here's the problem. This is the code I've tried, and this is why it's like why I think it's not working. How can I resolve this? Right. So you're setting up a framework which causes the least friction for them to reply. Um, and then what is the best way to reach people and form a connection? I'd say just like cold, cold DM, cold email. Well, that's not the best way. That's one of the ways. Like one of the better ways is like a warm connection. Like a warm connection is like when you know someone who knows the guy, so like they can be like if I know Elon Musk and like my friends over there, then I can intro my friend to Elon Musk. That's a warm connection. But so that's a really good way to form connections. And that's where your like current network, the current people becomes useful. And then for research projects, internships, um, so when I tried to getting an internship, there's like 2 ways to go about this, right? So one is like for like research internships specifically with like, professors at UCs is like one way to go about it is like, here's everything I've done, basically provide them a resume and like, can I get an internship, right? Which is like not, from what I've seen, my personal experience at least, it's not as effective if you like show interest in their research and like the problem like they're talking about, right? So like the perfect email, if I'm like some like Stanford machine learning professor, right? So the perfect email would be to me is like, one, I read your paper on like blah blah blah. Here, I really found it interesting how you did this. Here are some questions I have. And like I remember when I did this in one of my projects and like I like enhanced it, whatever, something like that. And then like, would you be down to chat or talk more about this with me? And then once you get into the meeting, then you can ask for like, can I work under you? Or like, like that's what my personal philosophy is. I know Sarish has also done research, so you could probably add on to that.
Yeah, maybe I can do it later, but I just want to say thank you for your time because that's kind of like the speaker event. But yeah, thank you for your time and for being here, and then I can answer this stuff after.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.